The relationship that we want to establish with our employees and the type of atmosphere that we would like to create is one of mutual respect. Right from the get-go, we do that through emphasizing what we call the 3 R's, respectfulness, resourcefulness, and responsiveness. Employees have to be very conscious of the fact that everything that they do directly and indirects students and their opportunity to receive an education, and safety has to be a primary concern. Part of school safety is the ability to recognize child abuse and what steps need to be taken when there is reasonable suspicion of child abuse. Child care custodians are required by law to report child abuse. Child care custodians include teachers, instructional aides, teachers' aides or assistants, classified employees, supervisors of child welfare and attendance, certificated pupil personnel employees. Child abuse is any act which impairs a child's physical and emotional development. It includes sexual assault of a child, willful cruelty, unjustifiable punishment, corporal punishment resulting in trauma, medical neglect, the infliction of mental suffering and neglect. When reasonable suspicion arises, it is the responsibility of the reporting party to make an immediate telephone report to either Child Protective Services or local law enforcement agency, and then within 36 hours of making the telephone report to file a written report through Child Protective Services. Those forms are available either at districts or at county offices. If anyone fails to report a suspected incident of child abuse, they may be found guilty of a misdemeanor. Additional information and literature on child abuse reporting can be found at district and/or county offices.
School safety is extremely important not only for children on campus but also staff. We all have an obligation to ourselves as well as those who are entrusted to our care during the day to make sure they're safe while they're in our care.
New employees come into a school as part of an extended team. They work together. They are part of what makes a school whole, from administration to cafeteria, to maintenance, to teachers, and it is because of that commitment to teamwork that we provide safe environments for our kids at all levels.
In general, school districts, of course, have changed their policy on safety since the Columbine incident in 1999.
All schools have safety plans. All schools have guidelines in which they respond appropriately to certain emergencies. So it's important for new employees to be familiar with the emergency plans that are on each campus.
Any threat should be taken seriously, especially these days. Nothing should be taken lightly, from somebody walking through that they feel should not be on campus, to a child walking by and saying something they think is inappropriate or could be a situation that gets out of control. Anything that is out of the ordinary should be taken seriously.
I would encourage all employees to always be alert, have their ears and eyes open. New employees, whatever their role may be, are the first line of defense. They are the ones that will know before someone else who's sitting in the office.
It is an individual responsibility, and we all have that responsibility. It doesn't matter whether you are a custodian or the school principal, cafeteria worker, instructional aide. We all share in that responsibility to keep the campus and everyone in it safe.
When we have employees start working in the school district, they'll be trained on how to use the equipment properly. They'll be trained on what protective equipment they need to be wearing. They'll be trained in how to use the equipment safely.
Bus drivers, of course, should be aware of their vehicle that they're going to drive during the day. Maintenance people, when they show up in the morning, should be aware of the grounds and the surroundings that they're walking into. People who are the first ones into a building should be aware of their surroundings. Make note of something that's out of the ordinary, smells that might be different, things that look like they're out of place should be reported.
So there are regulations in schools that deal with the appropriate types of markers and paints and solvents that can be used. And there is a list of them that is available, and every school will have that. And each teacher has access to all of those regulations, and specifically what they can and cannot use.
Things to be aware of, as we even would at home, would be cords in the middle of the room that we might trip over, water on the floor that we might slip on, making sure we lift things off the floor properly. We use our legs and not our back. Just common sense like you would at home to make sure that you are safe while you're at work.
When a student's injured, the first thing we're going to do is call 911. Thankfully, most student injuries are minor. Most teachers in their classrooms have a safety kit or first aid kit and are able to take care of small, scrapes and bruises in the classroom setting. If an employee is injured on the job, of course that becomes a workers' compensation situation.
It's deeply important that employees care about these kinds of things. It hinges on each person recognizing the need to take personal responsibility and acknowledging that it's not just for their own safety and well-being, but it's for the campus in its entirety.
Teachers are really very motivated to keep their classrooms healthy because they want the children to be there every day. The teachers work with their students on a regular basis, but particularly during flu and cold season. Many of our children in school do use medication on a regular basis. We ask for most of the time the medication be kept in the office. There is also medication that needs to be kept with the child because it's of an emergency nature. For example, asthma medication. And in that case, laws in California are very specific that students may carry their asthma inhaler medication with them as long as they've been properly instructed. And each school district has a board policy in regard to how medication can be distributed. When staff are hired, we talk about and do a training with them and provide our bloodborne pathogen policy and regulation that gives you the procedure on what to do in case there is a situation that occurs, that there's a possible blood-to-blood transfer between a student and a teacher. If there's blood-to-blood contact, the employee needs to contact their immediate supervisor right away. A staff person is instructed to come to the office and complete the paperwork that's required to go ahead and follow up. If they haven't had their hepatitis B shots, then that is immediately recommended and provided.
School systems recognize that people are going to confront challenges in their lives. That is why there are programs in place and why it is best to be open and honest with your immediate supervisor in figuring out how to access those resources that currently exist.
Every employee that works for a school district or a county office has the right to work in a drug and alcohol-free workplace. Employees who abuse drugs or alcohol cause increased medical benefit costs, there's more absenteeism, there's more tardiness. It also puts other employees at risk for safety hazards as well as security for the employer and the reputation of the employer.
County offices or any school district do conduct drug tests because we want to ensure the safety of our employees and we want to ensure the safety of students. And so we do drug test our employees based on whether or not they are in a position like transportation that would require the employee submit to a random drug test, and also in cases where we have reasonable suspicion of an employee who we think to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, we would require that individual to submit to a drug test.
Every employee that comes to work for this organization knows that we have a zero drug tolerance policy in place. If an employee is found to abuse drug or alcohol during the work hours, they have to know that they are subject to all state and federal regulations, employee contracts, collective bargaining agreements, and district policies and practices.
If individuals are able to admit to themselves that they have an issue with drugs or alcohol, the best thing that they can do is have a frank and confidential conversation with their immediate supervisor.
The EAP program, or the Employee Assistance Plan, is a wonderful tool that employees can use if they have a drug or alcohol problem. All of the information that the employee relays to EAP is strictly confidential. It can never be released to the employer unless the employee signs an authorization to do so. The EAP will assess the employee's problem, turn them towards the proper resources, and will monitor the progress throughout their treatment. Every employee has the right to workers' compensation benefits. Workers' compensation benefits include medical payment, they include temporary disability, they include permanent disability, and job retraining. No employee has to prove that their employer is at fault. The benefits are provided to them at the time of their injury.
We take sexual harassment very seriously. We expect the immediate supervisor to follow up on any complaints of sexual harassment, do an exhaustive investigation, and report any of those findings to Human Resources for any follow-up that may be required. There is training that is provided to supervisors to guard against sexual harassment and to be able to recognize it when it happens. Training takes place on an ongoing basis, and supervisors in the state of California are required to participate in training once every 2 years. It is important for a new employee to know that they should refrain from any kind of behavior, whether that be physical or whether that be verbal, that could be interpreted as being harassment or sexual harassment of students. The kinds of things would be talking to students inappropriately, about topics that are not appropriate for a student-teacher relationship, and any kind of physical activity, from just as simple as invading that student's personal space. We expect employees to dress professionally. We don't want them to wear anything that creates a safety hazard for themselves or for others. Also important to keep in mind that this is an educational setting, and we don't want employees wearing anything that could be considered too provocative, wearing kinds of things that depicts inappropriate topics, whether that be by words, graphics, pictures, or otherwise. Really important to realize that we are in an educational setting. We want employees to present themselves as professionals and model appropriate behavior, not only for others, but especially for students. Technology is provided to employees to make them more productive and efficient at the workplace. What we mean by technology is virtually anything that we use to communicate, whether that be the internet or email. Whether that's a fax machine, a microcomputer, all of those things that we use to communicate more efficiently with each other and as an organization would be considered technology. The rules regarding technology, I think first and foremost, it's just good to keep in mind that technology is provided at the workplace to make you more productive, to make you more efficient within the workplace. Personal use of technology in the workplace is generally prohibited, but it may be allowed so long as it doesn't pose a distraction to the employee or to others. Technology is always changing. With regard to emerging technologies, we are constantly having to revise policies to reflect those changes in technology. And it's really important that employees be aware of specific policies as they relate and change by site.
So the government doesn't take
the general rule about technology, including things like cell phones, for both students and employees, is that it not become a disruption to work and to education.
Because all employees are public employees, they do need to be concerned and aware of the rules that govern both gift of public funds as well as conflict of interest. And we would recommend that relative to those two issues, that the employees always refer to their board policies or specifically ask questions of their supervisor or director. The use of public funds is very simple in concept. It simply means that all funds coming into public entities must be used for the public good and must be used for the purpose for which they were intended. If in fact employees are given gifts, there are guidelines for that purpose and will help employees understand the rules and the regulations around that. But generally speaking, employees are not folks who would be able to receive gifts for their services.
That's nice. Good morning, Mr. Alvarado. Mr. Bryant, good morning, sir.
Teachers can always accept gifts from students as gifts of appreciation. Birthday presents, Christmas presents, end-of-year gifts, those will be always acceptable for employees. An employee cannot enter into a contract that will result in a perceived financial gain for that employee. If in fact there are questions about conflict of interest, we would recommend that the employee refer to their board policies or ask the question of their supervisor.
It is very important for a new employee to make sure that they familiarize themselves with the individual protocols and procedures that are associated with each site throughout the county. And they may differ slightly from site to site depending on the geography, depending on topography of the campus, and the number of staff, the number of students. So it's really critical that they familiarize themselves with those protocols and procedures that are in place for that particular site.